Hello everybody, how are we doing this week? Sorry that I missed last week's video. I felt really bad. Unfortunately I had some quite bad news. My grandpa passed away quite recently and we were very close. He lived just down the road from me. He brought me up with my mum and dad and he was a very big part of my life, so it's thrown me quite a lot. So I just wanted to apologise for not having a video last week, because that was the reason, along with having an absolute crap ton of work to still do for university. So because of that, I'm just going to dedicate this video to my grandpa, because he helped me get into loving history with all of his stories about being evacuated in the Second World War and telling me about the Anderson shelters and stuff like that. But maybe I'll do another video on those stories one day, but for now this video is dedicated to him. So, you might be a little bit confused about the title of this video, Hannah, the World War I Soldier. I got an email last week, at the beginning of last week, from the director of the current show that my drama group was doing, which was 1918 When the Guns Fell Silent. And it was all about the last year of the First World War from different perspectives, not only British, but there were German songs, German plays, Irish, Canadian, all the Allies and Axis. It was very moving. I saw it on Thursday last week, and by Friday I was asked to step in because unfortunately there were circumstances beyond their control and somebody dropped out, and I was asked to step in for their part instead. And I said yes, of course I will. Of course I will. I love drama, I love acting, and the only reason I didn't do this show was because of the time commitment, and I thought I'd be really stressed with the university, which I am. Which I really am. So I'm glad that I didn't do it properly, because those 3 months would have been a bit much for me. But I got asked to step in for the final 2 performances of this play. The parts that I were playing were just 2 narrators, essentially. I was dressed in kind of contemporary clothing in just a white shirt and black braces, which you'll see in a minute when I insert some clips from the play, because luckily my friend Sean from my drama group was recording that night of the show, so I managed to get some footage for you guys, because I've never really put anything of me acting before on YouTube. I've done backstage vlogs, but it's quite hard to get on stage footage because obviously there's audience there and I'm on stage, so it's difficult. So the first scene was about the Blue Patties. If you haven't heard of them, were the Newfoundland regiment of the First World War. So they came from Newfoundland, which is now part of Canada. It wasn't part of Canada then though, it was part of the British Empire, like a lot of other things were at that time. It didn't become part of Canada until 1949, so after the Second World War. And the Blue Patties were nicknamed as such for their unusual choice of blue puttees, which were the bandages around the World War I soldiers' ankles, kind of up to knee height, which served to provide both support and protection. I don't really know how much support and protection they would give you if you were shot in the leg, but never mind. My speech is about one of the youngest Allied soldiers to ever win the Victoria Cross. Victoria Cross, for non-military / historian-y interested people, is the highest medal of valour and honour and bravery that you can win within the British Army. He was the youngest army recipient fighting in a combatant role to win the Victoria Cross. So after my narration role about Thomas Ricketts, the youngest Victoria Cross recipient of the First World War, we sang a song about the Blue Patties and how they were enlisted, and a lot of them died in a fight at Beaumont-Hamel. Like, the whole regiment was wiped out by the Germans, so they were asked to enlist again, and here is the song that we sang. It's called The Blue Patties by the Great Big Sea, who are a Canadian band.
Two recruiting sergeants came to the CLT for the sons of the merchants to join the Blue Patties. So all hands enlisted, 500 young men. Enlist to Newfoundlanders and come follow me. They crossed the broad Atlantic in the brave Florizel, and on the sands of Suvla they entered into hell. And on those bloody beaches the first of them fell. English to Newfoundlanders and come follow me. It's over the mountains and over the sea. Come brave Newfoundlanders. all came from London for the last July drive. To the trenches with the regiment, prepare yourselves to die. And roll call next morning, but a handful survive. Enlist the Newfoundlanders and come follow me. And it's over the mountains and over the sea. Come brave Newfoundlanders and join the blue Patties. You'll fight the honeyed Flanders and a Gallipoli. Enlist the Newfoundlanders and come follow me. The stone men on Water Street still cry for the day. The pride of this city went marching away. 1,000 men slaughtered just to hear the king say, enlist the Newfoundlanders and come follow me. It's over the mountains and over the sea. Come brave Newfoundlanders and join the blue Patties. You'll fight the honeyed Flanders and a Gallipoli. Enlist the Newfoundlanders and come follow me. And it's over the mountains and over the sea. Come brave Newfoundlanders and join the blue Patties. You'll fight the honeyed Flanders and a Gallipoli. Enlist the Newfoundlanders and come follow me. Enlist the Newfoundlanders and come follow me. Enlist the Newfoundlanders and come follow me.
I really liked singing that song. I just think it had a really kind of good melody to it. It wasn't too sad, it wasn't too happy. It kind of conveyed the whole situation of enlisting of Canadian and Newfoundland soldiers into the First World War, because Britain were getting desperate and needed more men because so many millions of men died in the First World War. So my next scene was naming all of the shell-shocked patients at the local lunatic asylum to my house, which is called Cane Hill. And I call it a lunatic asylum in the context of that's what it was called. Now they would be called kind of mental hospitals, mental illness kind of centres, or just hospitals in general, but at the time it was called Cane Hill Lunatic Asylum. Please do look it up because it's got a really fascinating history. Built in Victorian England, not really London, but it was used to house the kind of Victorian mad of 1882 was when it was built, up until the late 1980s really, so it was only demolished quite recently for housing and stuff. So they managed to find records for nearly 40 servicemen that served in the Great War and were taken to Cane Hill from 1915 onwards, being treated for shell shock, which they didn't really know much about, which we now kind of recognise as PTSD. In 1981, remains of nearly 6,000 people were exhumed and cremated at Croydon Crematorium, and among those remains were the British servicemen. And this next scene, which I wanted to include, which I narrated, is the names of these servicemen, and we all lit a candle for them because they are often forgotten about. They were exhumed in a mass grave and then burnt along with 6,000 other mentally ill patients from Cane Hill from the Victorian era up until the late 1950s, when they stopped getting buried on the site. So we just wanted to remember the local men who were at this hospital with a candlelit vigil.
Private Alfred Charles Cartwright, Grenadier Guards.
Private Edmund Catlin, Royal Artillery.
Private Leonard Dobson, the Queen's Royal West Surrey Regiment.
Private Charles William Frey, the Middlesex Regiment.
Private Robert John Gibbons, Royal Army Medical Corps.
Private George John Groombridge, the Queen's Own Royal West Kent Regiment.
Private Bertie Harvey, Royal Welsh Fusiliers.
Private George John Laney, Royal Garrison Artillery.
Corporal George Charles Lawrence, Royal Flying Corps.
Private Alexander John Mackenzie, Northumberland Fusiliers.
Private William John Penny, the London Regiment.
Rifleman Samuel Schultnut, King's Royal Rifle Corps.
Rifleman Richard Leonard Skinner, King's Royal Rifle Corps.
Driver Walter William Sutton, Army Service Corps.
Private Frederick Taylor, Somerset Light Infantry.
Private Robert Thomas, Army Service Corps.
Private George Robert Tulloch, Welsh Regiment.
Private Henry Albert Wilson, South Wales Borderers.
In July 2017, a local resident wrote, "How sad that these servicemen, shunned by society and labelled as lacking moral fibre, should suffer the final indignity of being exhumed and cremated along with 6,000 odd other burials at Cane Hill. Little was known then about what has become post-traumatic stress disorder, but it is so sad that our country sees fit to treat its soldiers in such a cavalier fashion. Thank you for finally acknowledging the sacrifice made by these men, trapped in their shattered minds for many years. Peter Thomas."
Our history is never as far away as you think. Sometimes its echoes come down to us, even through the passage of 100 years.
And so history marches on. We can no longer hear or begin to imagine the voices of those soldiers, trapped in their shattered minds, wandering the Gothic corridors of an asylum outside Halston. But we do have the words of the war poet, Siegfried Sassoon, in his poem, Survivors.
No doubt they'll soon be well. The stress and strain have caused their stammering, disconnected talk. Of course they're longing to go out again. Those boys with old scarred faces, learning to walk. They'll soon forget their haunted nights, their cowed subjection to the ghosts of friends that died, their dreams that drip with murder, and they'll be proud of glorious war that shattered all their pride. Men who went to battle, grim and glad, children with eyes that hate you, broken and mad.
Thank you very much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed seeing why I was so busy last week, and I hope that I did the servicemen of Cane Hill proud, and the whole play served as a fantastic reminder and poignant remembrance of the First World War, and I was very honoured to be able to take part in it, even though it was just for such a small amount of time and small scene and only 2 performances. I was honoured. So thank you very much for asking me to step in Theatre Workshop. I very much appreciated it. Thank you very much, and I shall see you next week.